Hi friends, Nick with Downstream here, and today I'm going to show you an easy way to put backing and new line on a reel. First of all, we got to check the drag and understand that out of the box, most are left-hand retrieve reels. So if you are a right-hand retrieve, you're going to want to look at your instructions and go ahead and turn the drag the other way. First things first is we got to take the spool out of the reel. A lot of reels you can just turn over and push with your thumbs and push that out, but on this one we're gonna have to spin this knob on the front, loosen it up, not all the way. You don't take this screw off, but you just pull the spool out like so. And now what we need to do is take the end of the backing, and we're going to add a little stop knot on the very end here, just a simple little overhand, and it's going to be a stop knot, and you'll see how that works here soon. But pull that nice and tight, make it small, and we'll trim off the end right down to the knot we just made, okay? Now, when you're looking at your reel or spool, I mean, pretend this is an entire reel, of course. This is a left-hand retrieve, so it's going to retrieve line going this way, meaning it'll pull the line in underneath the spool and going up over the. But as we're adding our backing, we're going to reverse that flow and bring it over the top and going around behind and then underneath. And the end of the backing that we just made that little stop knot on, we're going to pull that around and do another overhand knot over the top of the running line or the running end of the backing going back to the spool. So just another simple overhand knot, and we'll cinch that down. That little knot we made before, see, that's the stop knot. So the one we're doing now is kind of a little slip knot, and that's going to allow it to tighten down nicely on the spool. But we'll tighten this one down. That slip knot will get stopped by the stop knot, and we'll just cinch, pull it tight. I like to pull up and down until it really grips the center of your spool here. And now we need to place a spool back into the reel. We want to pull your running line or your backing up in front of this little, here on the bottom of the reel there, make sure it's going out the front. And if it's just a push and pull apart, you just snap it back together. But of course this one, we have to screw this little knob back down to tighten the spool into the reel again. So we'll make sure that's nice and snug. And now we're ready to reel the line on the backing onto the reel and spool itself. And to spool all this line on, I'm going to stick a pen or a pencil through the backing spool here, and I'm going to have somebody hold on to it or use my feet actually to put a little bit of pressure on the pen there, and I'll just sit and wind all that backing, about 100 yards on this backing here. This is a 100-yard spool onto this reel. And as I'm reeling, I'm going back and forth and making sure the backing is laying in with a little bit of tension, not too much, but nice and even as you're building the layer. Now I've got my 100 yards of backing on here now, and we're to the end of the backing spool. And what we have to do now is do an overhand knot or a loop knot here that's going to be big enough to pass the reel through. So we're just going to double the line over like so. And again, I got to make sure it's big enough to go over the reel. And all we got to do is keep these two ends pinched and just do an overhand like that, pull that through, and now we have a nice big loop on the end. Nice small knot there, big loop, and make sure that pulls tight and holds steady. We'll trim this little piece off right here. And there's your nice big loop. And now we'll take our fly line and pull this little tag off. The end that's toward you here is the end that goes on to your reel first. See it labeled right there, so we'll pull this off. It's a little tough, we'll just slide it off the end here, there we go. And it's got a welded loop there on the end. Both ends have a welded loop on the fly line. So now we're just gonna do a simple loop-to-loop connection. I'll pinch the backing loop, put it through that little welded loop on the fly line, pull the backing through until that big loop that we made in the backing fits over the top of the reel. So that's why we had to make a big enough loop to fit over the reel. And now we can pull that loop-to-loop connection down and make it nice and tight. Loop-to-loop connection is super, super, super strong. It's thin and aerodynamic. You do have one little loop-to-loop connection on the left and a very, very small knot on the right. And now we're ready to put the fly line, or spool the fly line, reel the fly line onto the reel. Most people like to use the little pen trick, just like we did for the backing. I'll show you a different trick here. I almost forgot, this little sticker here is handy. A lot of people throw this away, but if you peel this little sticker off and add it to your spool or reel or somewhere else, that helps you remember what line you got on said spool or said reel. It's kind of a handy little thing to have. There you go. Now we're going to want to wind the fly line evenly with a little bit of pressure back and forth so it builds up evenly. We don't want to stack a bunch of line on one side, just like we do with the backing. Here's that trick I was talking about. Instead of the pen trick, throw it in a bucket of water and spool it on yourself. It works really, really well. That line just unwinds nicely, super fast without knotting up, and we are done. There it is, fully spooled reel, ready to rock. The last little trick is that for stability and ease, when you're putting your backing and line on, take your reel and mount it to the butt piece, the reel seat on the butt piece of your fly rod. And that just gives you something to grab onto, makes reeling on the line a little bit easier, especially if you add a little tension with your finger there against the cork, or you have an eyelet. This rod doesn't have an eyelet or a stripping guide there on the front of the butt end piece, but if it does, you run the line through that and then put a little tension on the cork here.